Hi, everybody. My name is Jay Culkin. I am the Youth Workforce Development Coordinator at Families Together in New York State. And I'm going to be doing the webinar for Code of Ethics for Youth Peer Advocates. And I will have my coworker introduce herself as well.
Hi guys, my name is Mimi. I am the youth training coordinator here at Families Together, and I think there's some slides for us to introduce ourselves to.
All right, so we will get a little further on and we'll have those introduction slides, right? Yeah, so this is my introduction, being the Youth Workforce Development Coordinator. Um, these are all the things that I have done. I have a credential for youth peer advocate, and I am also a New York State certified peer specialist. This is Mimi is going to be doing the support facilitating. She's going to do the other half of it with me.
Yes, and I am a credentialed youth peer advocate as well as a family peer advocate here in New York State, and I like to work with young people that are interested in advocacy and promoting the youth voice.
So I'm going to be looking off to the side because I kind of have, everything on a second screen as well. So you'll see me go kind of from side to side. Um, so let's get to know y'all as well, everybody that's on the webinar today. If you could introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already, because I saw a couple people already putting some hellos in there. Your name, organization that you're from, and a fun fact about you, as well as what is your favorite candy, because we are in February and we just had a big commercial holiday, Valentine's Day, where everybody buys those, candies, chocolates, and things. So, and as you guys are putting that in the chat, today's objectives are going to be to enhance comprehension of the YPA Code of Ethics, promote ethical conduct of youth peer advocates, and examine policies, procedures, and best practices for the youth peer advocate workforce. So our agenda for today, some of the things we're going to be going over, we're going to go over the key role of the youth peer advocate and have an activity for that. The activity is going to be, mostly in the chat. You can unmute if you want, but if you want to put your answers in the chat or do the activity in the chat. We're going to talk about boundaries and have an activity associated with that, and then documentation and an activity associated with that. We're going to do the violation policies, just talk quickly about, what happens if code of ethics are violated, and have a Q&A. If we have some time, we'll have a big Q&A for everybody to ask any leftover questions that they might have. Okay. I am going to drop the code of ethics document in the chat as well as a PDF so that you all can follow along. So that when we get to the Q&A, you can ask any specific questions about the code of ethics that you'd like through the document. Right. So the key role of the youth peer advocate, there's commitment to youth, right? Empowerment, competence, commitment to partnership, and integrity. So those are the parts of the code of ethics that sort of go into that key role of the youth peer advocate. So that first part, commitment to youth, right? So we're going through all five of those that were on that last slide. So the commitment to youth, you're prioritizing youth well-being, promoting self-determination for the youth, support family involvement with the youth and the youth's treatment or whatever they may be going through, remaining culturally humble and trauma-informed. So we learn a lot of those skills in the 4-day training. We have like a whole section dedicated to being culturally humble, using strength-based language, and modeling positive behavior. Letter B, that second one on the list, is empowerment and self-determination. So we're foster youth independence, hope, and resiliency, supporting youth in self-advocacy, advocating for youth to shape their own service plan, provide transparent information, and support that is minimally intrusive to the family's dynamic. The third one on the list, D, although I'm not sure why it says D. Oh, okay, that's why. So it is not in order. We're just talking, we're kind of putting our the pieces of the code of ethics that relate to the role of the youth peer advocate in that section, but it's not necessarily in alphabet order. I should have said that. So D on the list, the third one is going to be competence as a youth peer advocate, deliver skilled services, and stay updated on best practices. If you are coming to continuing education, if you're going to a webinar like this, staying informed, doing other CTAC webinars, families together, technical assistance calls, that's keeping those up to date on those best practices and interacting with other youth peer advocates to find out, what best practices they are practicing in their workplace. Ensuring provision of services remains within the boundaries of the youth peer advocate training. Embracing your lived experience, only share when appropriate. We also have some, tools for strategic sharing. We go over that in the 4-day training. There's actually some info on PeerTac, which is, it's not active right now, but the website still has the information and all of the projects that were previously worked on when PeerTac was live. So if you wanted to check those things out. Having insight and awareness of your own well-being. So there's lots of stuff with self-care. We actually have next week, on Tuesday, a webinar about self-care as a youth peer advocate, seeking opportunities to collaborate with other providers, and welcoming feedback from youth and families. The fourth one, which is the letter K on the document, commitment to partnership. Work with interdisciplinary teams. So for that, for the youth peer advocate, that could look like a care manager, that could look like a direct support person, that could look like the clinician, family members. They're all going to be on that interdisciplinary team. Connecting youth to support systems, develop advocacy skills, and remain informed about colleagues' areas of expertise. So this is a big one for us. We might have somebody who has lived experience in the mental health field, or the mental health system, and you might have somebody who has experience in the justice system, and you might have somebody who has experience in the foster care system or child welfare system, that will be able to give different types of lived experience. So if you have a colleague through Families Together, meeting other youth peer advocates from across the state, you'll find that people have different lived experience that you can also learn about and tap into for your own work. And the fifth one on the list, the final one for the key role of the youth peer advocate, is integrity. So upholding and advancing youth peer advocate values, develop leadership skills continuously, contribute to peer advocacy research, empower youth leadership and youth guided practices, and promote respect for youth, families, and the YPA workforce. So let's do a quick activity. Breach of the YPA Code of Ethics. So we're going to review scenarios. I'm going to read them out. There's one scenario. I'm going to review that scenario. I'm going to read it out. And we're going to talk about what was violated in that, which parts of the Code of Ethics were violated in that scenario. Alex, a youth peer advocate, has been working with Jordan, a 17-year-old in foster care, who struggles with anxiety and self-doubt. Jordan has been hesitant to speak up in meetings about their own needs, and Alex has been encouraging them to advocate for themselves. However, during a recent meeting with Jordan's care team, Alex made several mistakes that compromised their role as a youth peer advocate. So here's what happened. Speaking over Jordan. During the team meeting, Jordan tried to express their concerns about a housing transition, but Alex interrupted and spoke on their behalf, assuming that they knew what was best for Jordan without asking for their input. Ignoring family involvement. Jordan's aunt, who had been a supportive figure, expressed interest in being involved in Jordan's care plan. However, Alex dismissed the aunt's input, stating, "We don't really need family involved. I think it's best for Jordan to handle this independently." Sharing misinformation. When Jordan asked about their rights regarding housing options, Alex provided outdated and incorrect information instead of verifying facts with appropriate agencies. Overstepping the youth peer advocate role. After the meeting, Alex advised Jordan to refuse a service plan recommended by professionals without offering Jordan the full picture or allowing them to make an informed decision. And finally, the lack of professional development. Alex had not attended recent trainings about trauma informed care and advocacy strategies, leading to mishaps in guiding Jordan. So that's everything that we have to work with this scenario. Given all of that, where did Alex violate the code of ethics? If anybody has any guesses, um, think about those five that we just went over. If you want to review the document and take a look at that, if you could put in the chat, where did Alex violate the code of ethics? Mimi says commitment to youth. Yep, commitment to youth. Telling Jordan to deny help from the school. Yeah, yeah. So kind of taking the lead on that and saying, okay, Jordan, I'm telling you what to do. You got to deny the help. That's not for you, you know? Speaking over Jordan, youth commitment, empowerment and self-determination. Yep. Speaking for what he think is good for Jordan. Yep. Speaking over Jordan, we've talked about that. Okay. So there will be some answers on the next slide, and we'll get to that part. How could Alex have handled the meeting differently? I know a couple of you already put something like that in the chat, but think about what Alex could have done differently for all those parts that he got wrong. That family involvement piece, the lack of professional development we talked about, outdated information, any of those things. What could he have done differently? Okay. Milagros says Alex could have allowed Jordan to share without speaking over him, using inclusion and empathy. Letting Jordan run the meeting. Only step in if verbal assistance is needed. Yeah. Alex could have done more effective listening. Yep. And that's something we go over in the 4-day training, right? And, we've had continuing education and technical assistance on that active listening, reflective listening skills. Yeah. And allowing Jordan to speak, be up to date on current information he's giving, asking permission from Jordan before speaking on his behalf. Alex could have involved Jordan's aunt, who is a supportive family figure. Yeah. So the trend that I'm seeing with what y'all are saying in the chat is Jordan should be at the forefront, right? That's the big part. The role of the youth graphic is not to be the star and take up all of it and be the loud one speaking over and everything like that. It's that like support, that amplifying the voice of the youth. Perfect. Awesome. What impact might these actions have on Jordan's confidence and independence? Right. So if we're not keeping to that, thinking about we're not keeping to the youth advocate code of ethics, violating those ethical requirements that we have as youth advocates, what is that doing to the youth? Right. Jordan was already having difficulties expressing himself. So when they did speak up, Alex spoke over them, which must not have felt good at all, right? Yeah, I'm sure that didn't do much for the confidence part. Low self-esteem. Yeah, yeah, because you're not being listened to, you're not being heard, you're not feeling heard. Instills passiveness tendency in Jordan's confidence, will make him less likely to speak up in the future. Yeah, you guys are coming up with really good ones. Jordan could think that's normal behavior and expect others to treat them that way in the future. Yeah, a lot of the youth that we work with already get that, right? They already have been spoken over. They already feel like, well, that's just the way it goes, right? So we're leading the charge on that not being the case. Lower self-esteem, doubting self, feeling no voice, and he won't be as open again. Yeah. What steps could Alex take to correct their approach by moving forward? Which kind of similar to that second question, but what are like some sort of preventative measures, so to speak? Like what can he do next time? Take more trainings. Yes. So what do we have at Families Together? What do we have at CTEC? More trainings. Um, educate himself on current things. Okay. Yep. Yeah, because we talked about the housing, right? That was part of it, was he gave outdated information about housing. So, okay, this is a school meeting. I better look up all the things that come with, the goals of the youth. What are the youth's goals? Is it housing? Do I have to do more research on housing? Do I have to do more research on maybe vocational training because the youth wants to have a job or go into education? Yeah. Be quiet, include, encourage. Yeah. Um, One-on-one practice with senior staff. Yep. Yeah. When I was still doing direct services, we had a peer mentorship program, youth peer advocate, two youth peer advocate together. We would share those best practices with each other, and you'd have somebody who's a more seasoned youth peer advocate kind of, excuse me, giving some like advice or pointers or tips to the new youth peer advocate. So, it's a great idea. Means to step back and prioritize the youth. Introduce Alex as the main man in the beginning of the meeting. Give him confidence to speak for his needs and wants. Make Jordan feel special. Yeah, I kind of like that idea of like saying it right from the beginning of the meeting. Hey, this is Jordan. Jordan's the one that's it's great. Role play questions that could possibly come up. Have Jordan make a have Jordan make a list of questions to ask, include family, and allow their questions as well. Great. Take a step back and identify where he went wrong. He probably overstepped his boundaries because he genuinely cares. I love that. I love that you pointed that out, that it's like, well, he had good intentions, but it's good to step back and look at what was the impact though. Here are my intentions. This is why I wanted to do this, was the intended, you know, um, result, but this is what ended up happening. This is how it landed. And I'm going to learn from that so that I carry that into the next meeting that I have good intentions for. Great. Awesome. So let's go over some of the answers, some of the sort of, um, you know, through all these different pieces of the key role of the youth career advocate. Um, what did Alex do? So for B, empowerment and self-determination, right? Y'all mentioned that as part of it. Alex did not empower Jordan to voice their concerns, instead speaking over them and making decisions for them. Uh, Letter A, commitment to youth. Alex failed to support family involvement, even though Jordan's aunt wanted to help, ignoring the principle of viewing families as part of the solution. D, competence as a youth peer advocate. Alex provided incorrect information about housing, which could mislead Jordan and affect their decision making, right? And I'm thinking, in my experience, it's like if you're giving somebody information that, oh, there's this new housing program, there's a housing program that I can take advantage of. Yeah, I'm gonna start making that my goal. And now the program doesn't exist, right? Or the requirements of the program, they're not eligible for it anymore. And now they've given up kind of everything else for that. Commitment to partnerships, so that's letter K. Alex did not collaborate with professionals or seek guidance from colleagues, resulting in poor advocacy. And L, integrity. By acting independently rather than empowering Jordan and providing accurate information, Alex failed to uphold the ethical standards of the YPA role. Right. So transitioning into section 2, boundaries, I'm going to hand it over to Mimi for this part.
Thanks, Jay. I did just see a hand raised. Caitlin, did you have a question?
My name is Caden, and yes, I do have a question. Or not really a question per se, but more something to add because I'm somebody who has also like gone through the youth, and it's very prevalent to see those things very much happening every day. I literally just had to console one of my chosen family members because my niece was like hey, uncle, I've been trying to get housing, but like they don't consider her serious. So they don't take her seriously. So she's still on tier one when she could be on tier four because she's almost 25.
Yeah. Thank you so much for making that point. It's absolutely like necessary in our work that we're prioritizing the youth and that we're making sure that everyone on their team is taking them seriously and that they know that this youth is here to get the help that they need and that it's our responsibility as whatever part we are playing on the treatment team to make sure that they're getting the access and things that they need. And so that you're absolutely right. It's really part of our job and our role here to make sure we're advocating on behalf of those youth. Thank you. Alrighty, guys. So for section two, we're going to dive into boundaries. So during this section, we will be discussing diversity and respect, ethical integrity, conflicts of interest, and personal relationships. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we talk about respect for diversity, it's really crucial that we remember that it's not just about us acknowledging differences, but actively embracing and valuing them. So, first, we want to make sure that we do not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate in any form of discrimination. This includes discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, race, sex, sexual orientation, age, religion, national origin, marital status, political belief, mental or physical disability, military or veteran status, socioeconomic status, immigration status, or any other preference, condition, or state. I know that's a lot, but I mention it because it's really important that we understand that this encompasses the whole part of being a human. And so we're not going to discriminate against anyone's status, preference, condition, or state. And again, I understand that most of us as YPAs, we don't strive to use harmful language or to discriminate, but it is important that sometimes the youth that we work with might have biases or they might say things that we need to address so that we're not condoning or facilitating this kind of behavior or language. One of the examples that we talk about in our 4-day training are youth that might use some sort of derogatory language. As a YPA in your work, you might find that it's uncomfortable to confront a youth who is using a racial slur or perhaps some sort of derogatory name calling or information, even as they're talking to you about their lived experience, or it could be just a bias that they have. It might be just something that's natural for them to use in their language. However, as a YPA, it is necessary that we set boundaries amongst the language that is used. And if you do feel like a youth is using discriminatory language or practices, you want to approach that from a trauma-informed, kind of ideology, but make sure that they know the impact of the words that they use. Make sure that they understand how they could possibly be perceived if they're using that kind of language in a meeting around people that they're seeking assistance from. And just let them know that you, as a YPA, will not allow them and how they can go ahead and move forward. So maybe giving them some sample language that they can use or some alternatives too. You can always have your youth also complete some trainings and everything else to make sure that they are also culturally sensitive. So, in our work, it's also important that we're introspective and that we take the time to identify and understand any biases that might interfere with our ability to work with a youth or a family and their natural supports. So, for example, some of us might have less experience working in diverse communities. For myself, I grew up in New York City. That's a very diverse community. However, I now live in upstate, Western New York. Some of our communities here are very rural. And so that means as a YPA, you might not have as much experience working with that diverse community, but you want to make sure that you identify and understand what your biases are that might keep you from working with them in a good way. That way you can address them and you can take the work to go ahead and improve on that cultural humility skill. You might also have, someone who is using different pronouns, and that might be something that's novel and new to you. So if that's the case, you always want to make sure that you are taking the time to understand where this bias is coming for yourself and then work on introducing that new language and that new skill. However, if there is something that prevents you from being able to work with a youth or family, makes you extremely uncomfortable, or goes against something that's very important to you, like a religious practice or belief, please make sure that you're seeking guidance from your supervisor and give yourself grace. It is very much okay to admit that you may not have shown up in the way that you wanted to, but you can always use this as an opportunity to learn and to practice cultural humility. We want to make sure that we respect and understand cultural identities and nuances. So we have to understand that each person's background is unique, and recognizing these differences will actually allow us to advocate effectively for cultural as well as linguistic respect. So I find that one of the easiest ways to advocate for this is to simply ask questions. I once had a youth who, when I read her file before I met with her, was always labeled as discouraged, absent, refuses to make eye contact, just labeled in very negative language. And when I met with this youth and I went to a meeting, I noticed that they weren't making eye contact or interacting with a lot of the males in the room. And I took the time to have a private conversation with her. And this youth was able to let me know I'm a practicing Muslim. And so in my culture, it's not appropriate for me to have physical contact or kind of just this open contact with people that are males that are not involved in my direct family. And so as a result, we brainstormed, well, how can we make sure that you feel heard in your meetings, that you can participate in those meetings? And so she started writing down notes. Even during meetings, I would sit in between her and other male counterparts just to make sure that she was comfortable and able to interact that way. So sometimes just asking questions and leaving room for people to tell you about themselves and their practices really allows you to then be able to step up and advocate for them. In this case, this youth felt very comfortable being able to say, this is what I need, but she just didn't know that that was a conversation she needed to have, and how not having that conversation led to the negative perception of her participation in her work plan. So sometimes just having the conversation really gives you the information you need to make sure that you can advocate for themselves, or that you can step in and advocate for them if needed. So in terms of recognizing cultural, individual, and role differences, we also need to recognize that just because two people have the same cultural background, they could grow up in the same neighborhood, they could even grow up in the same household, it does not mean that they have the same cultural identity. Holidays and traditions can hold different weights for different individuals, and as such, we should try to make sure that we provide services that are sensitive to an individual's culture. A respect for diversity includes the need to appreciate both our own culture as well as the culture of others. So this appreciation helps us to bridge gaps and foster an inclusive environment where everyone can feel valued. It's okay if respect for diversity is hard for you. Being transparent, we've had many YPAs in our advanced training who have said that this part is hard for them, and addressing personal biases is hard. But identifying this deficit and seeking resources and help is exactly the kind of thing that allows us to respect others' diversity. So remember, this is not just a principle, but it is a practice that reflects ongoing reflection and commitment as a YPA. And we should always strive to recognize and celebrate the cultural, individual, and role differences that enrich our communities. Next slide. Alrighty, so next we're going to be talking about ethical integrity. So ethical integrity is literally the cornerstone of our professional conduct as YPAs. This starts with upholding honesty. Honesty isn't just about telling the truth, though. It's also about us being consistent and transparent in all of our interactions with youth and their families. This builds trust and credibility. Both are essential in maintaining our ethical standards, and includes not participating or condoning dishonesty, fraud, or deception. Next, we also need to avoid exploitation. This means respecting the vulnerability of those that we're working with and ensuring that our actions as YPAs does not take advantage of their trust or circumstances. So this can also branch into ensuring that you're not exploiting your professional relationship for personal gain. So let's say, for example, you're working with a youth who's well connected in your community, they do a lot of community events, and they are offering you tickets to a show. Sometimes accepting gifts can actually lead to exploitation. So using your relationship with them to get discounts or invites, it might seem harmless, but this really is for your personal gain, not for the youth's. So even if you're offered a gift, you should always refer to your agency's guidelines and ensure that you're setting and upholding good professional boundaries that protect both you and the youth and the families that you're working with. It's important to note that we also hold a lot of power in this role, and that it's a privilege to serve these youth. So remember that it's a privilege to have access to the intimate ins and outs of their lives, as well as their homes and their recovery journeys, and that these youth and families are choosing to let us in. We want to make sure that we are stewarding that trust well, and we should not take advantage of them. If you're faced with ethical conflicts as a YPA, always seek guidance. Your first line of support should always be your direct supervisor, although it's noted that other YPAs and colleagues in the peer space, as well as even families together, can be great resources and can help you seek appropriate resolutions for ethical dilemmas. At all times, it is crucial that you act in accordance with laws and your organizational standards. And remember that ethical dilemmas can be complex, but there are resources that can help you support the youth that you're working with. Another thing that I'll mention in this part too, when we're acting in accordance with laws and organizational standards, if a youth says something to you and you know that you will have to report this because you're a mandated reporter, it is very helpful to, as a part of this, have a conversation with the youth and let them know that based on what you're sharing, I have to do the following steps, and let them know what that process is going to look like. So that way they understand that their honesty with you is not something that you're taking advantage of, that this is just simply a part of your job and part of the scope of your work, but that makes sure that they will choose to still be honest with you in those other moments and know that you're not reporting them or reporting the situation because you're against them or you want to be discouraging, but simply because it's a safety concern and these are the steps we need to take. Next up, next slide, please. All right, conflicts of interest. So it is very important that we identify and manage conflicts of interest with the help of guidance. So this means being vigilant about any situations that might compromise your impartiality for a youth. So be alert and inform your supervisor, the young person, and their families if the conflict for such ever arises. It's really important in this space that we also avoid dual relationships. Dual relationships are relationships where the personal and professional roles may overlap, which can lead to biased decision making and harm trust. So, for example, you could be a YPA who lives in a small town, a rural area, or even sometimes in a big city. You might have gone to school with a youth's older sibling, or maybe your families go to the same church. That means that you've probably had some close communication with them. But this might be a conflict of interest for you to work with this youth as a youth peer advocate. So this is something that you'd want to address as soon as possible, preferably before interacting with the youth and family, and make sure that you take that concern to your supervisor. In some cases, however, you might be the only YPA in your region or the only YPA at your agency who can actually provide services to this youth. So if these relationships are unavoidable, be sure to take steps to protect the young person that you're working with and set professional boundaries to make sure you protect yourself. Even with conflicts of interest, I'll give you guys a really easy example too. Most of us as youth, we might be into video games. It is totally okay if you're going to sit there in your agency space, in your game room, and play video games with a youth while you guys are networking, you're talking about coping skills, you're just meeting generally. But it's not okay if you then give them your gamer handle and you are now gaming with them after hours and talking to them on Discord and other things like that. You want to set those professional boundaries. So you want to avoid communicating with our youth outside of your normal professional space. You just don't want to blur any lines. Make sure that you're always setting clear boundaries. Establishing these boundaries helps to maintain professional integrity and protect all parties involved. Avoid interacting with youth on social media also, or outside of the professional role. I'm not going to lie, I have definitely run into youth that I work with in the community. Rochester is not that big. But one of the things that I do is during my first meeting, I always let youth know if I see you out in the community, I will not approach you. I want to protect your privacy. I will not approach you. However, if you want to approach me or say hello, I will welcome that and have a short hello, goodbye conversation. But I do that in an effort to protect their privacy. I don't ever want to approach a youth and say hi to them and have their friends then questioning who is that and why do they know you and all these other things. And so sometimes even just taking steps like that can make sure that you're setting those clear boundaries and there's no conflict of interest. Next slide. All right, and lastly, we're going to talk about personal relationships and the importance of maintaining these professional boundaries. So, it is crucial to prohibit any sexual relationships with youth or family members that are currently or have formerly received services. If there has been a past sexual relationship, it is essential that you do not provide services to those individuals or their family members to avoid any potential conflicts or biases. These types of relationships can compromise the integrity of our professional roles. So if you show up at a youth's home and realize, oops, I actually used to date your cousin, that is a conflict of interest. You're going to want to pleasantly dismiss yourself, let them know that you need to touch base with your supervisor before you can move forward, and make sure that your supervisor is aware of this before you continue to work with the family. Lastly, always ensure to follow all agency policies regarding these relationships. These policies are there to maintain the safety and trust of the people that we serve, as well as your own safety. Remember that maintaining these boundaries not only protects you, but it makes sure that your youth are always safe, and it makes sure that there's no chance of something coming back where someone says, hey, I thought that this relationship between this person was inappropriate. So make sure that you're protecting yourself too. Alrighty, next we're going to move into a definition matching game. Please feel free to come off of mute or put your answers in the chat. And I just want to reiterate that this is a safe learning environment. So it is okay if you don't know the answer or if you have questions or if you put the wrong answer in there. No one is going to laugh at you or shame you. So let's just grow together. We will start with the first one. So if I say that the definition of this word is to promote the well-being and independence of youth while keeping with all applicable laws, would I be talking about empowerment, commitment to youth, or competence? I see some answers for empowerment. A lot of empowerment. Okay. Anyone else think anything else? Oh, Caitlin says B, commitment to youth. I like Sarah. Sarah says all of the above. Yeah. The correct answer for this one is actually commitment to youth. So our commitment to youth is what is promoting the well-being and independence of youth while keeping up with all applicable laws. And I would say that the biggest key point in here is while we're talking about keeping up with all applicable laws, which is why that is more commitment to youth. But you're absolutely right. By promoting the well-being and independence, we are talking about making sure that they're competent and that they're also empowered. Next one. All right, we are going to uphold and advance the values, ethics, knowledge, and mission of the YPA movement by working towards the highest standard of YPA practice. Is this integrity, empowerment, or commitment to partnership? Okay, and once again, I see a lot of A's, so integrity. Lots and lots of A's. We've got a commitment to partnership, A or C, okay. Great job, guys. So most of you got this one correct. The answer is, in fact, integrity. So our integrity helps us to uphold and advance the values, ethics, knowledge, and mission of the YPA movement by working towards the highest standard of YPA practice. All right, and I think this one is actually our last one. So working to enhance one's understanding of all systems involved in the lives of young people and their families with complex needs. Again, a lot of A's. B, commitment to partnership. Oh, now we've got a lot of B's. Awesome. So it seems like for this one, we are stuck between A and B. So the correct answer for this one is actually B, commitment to partnership. And this would be because we are trying to understand all of the systems that are involved with the young people and their families. But I agree that a lot of these words are really hard for us to distinguish from one another, and they can sometimes really kind of encapsulate each other. So great job, guys, and thank you so much for learning with us. We are going to move on to section 3, and I will toss it back to Jay.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So, part of the documentation section of the Code of Ethics includes informed consent, access to records, confidentiality, and responsibilities when credentialed. I don't know what that little shortened thing is, but we'll keep going anyway. There we go. All right. So that first section, informed consent. So that's letter F on your document, your Code of Ethics document. Provide understandable information about the YPA role to youth and families. So making sure it's in plain language and it's in the language that the youth and families speak. Advocate for youth and families to receive accurate, transparent, and understandable information, and support youth and families in asking questions, right? So that they know better what they are agreeing to or, what they're speaking about in a meeting. Letter G is access to records. Assist youth and family in obtaining records, advocate for youth and families' right to obtain records, and ensure notes are strength-based, culturally humble, and created in partnership when possible. And this is something that youth peer advocates should know, as well as clinicians, but clinicians definitely should consider this as well. You should be writing any notes, any documentation, as if the family could request it at any time. Because it's true, the youth and family could request it at any time that is within their right. Right. So making sure that, even if you work in like I'm coming up with an example, right? If you work in a residential community or a residential facility, you might want to talk to a clinician about that and say, like, while we're having this meeting, the service plan meeting, hey, just making sure, the youth could read this. We just want to make sure that we are describing the youth accurately and we're using the strength-based language so that when the youth does, or if the youth does want to receive it, they see that the clinicians, that the youth crowd, because everybody has that, like, keep going, you're good, we got you, like, type of feel. And respecting, um, their culture, their identity, and all of that. Letter H on your Code of Ethics document is confidentiality and privacy. So respect the privacy of the youth and families in accordance with the law. So that kind of goes along with Mimi's example of, like, if I run into you, I'm not going to talk to you directly. You have to talk to me. Keep respecting that privacy. Sharing confidential information only when necessary and with consent. So going back to that, like, mandated reporter part, and the next part, explain that you are a mandated reporter. It can be very helpful to let the youth know. And there's these little posters that you can get, and it has, like, these are the 4 reasons that I would have to report. If you're going to hurt yourself, if you're going to hurt others, if a child is in danger or any youth under the age of 18 is in danger, and if you tell me, you want me to report or talk about something, and that may vary, checking with your individual organizations and seeing if there are any other, reasons, but just being transparent about that right from the get-go with the family and the youth. Notify youth and families when confidential information is disclosed, and protect records from unauthorized access. Letter M on your Code of Ethics document, responsibilities when credentialed. Remain current on credential renewals and extensions. Please send us send us your applications. Go through your continuing education. There are requirements specific to youth peer advocates having a certain amount of hours of training. This is hours. If you have the attendance for this, this will contribute to your continuing education hours. Any of our technical assistance calls will go towards your continuing education hours so that you can renew on time your credential. Or if you have a provisional credential and you haven't, gotten all the requirements yet, make sure that you send that extension request as well, so that your credential doesn't lapse and then, you're not able to provide those services. You don't, have the continuing education or the 4-day training to really like solidify your role and learn more about like what techniques you can use to work with the youth. So that's very important to keep up to date on all of that. Complying with the YPA Code of Ethics, that's why we're here, right? So that's very important. Cooperating with any ethics investigations, and we are going to get to that in a few slides, what that's going to look like. And only represent oneself as a youth peer advocate when in full compliance with Code of Ethics. More, I think. No, okay. So now we're going to do a who's leading who activity. For each scenario, determine who is leading, what barriers might be preventing it from being youth guided, and who is affected, and how would you correct the situation. So here is the first one. A YPA has been invited by the young person to a meeting at the school. The team is discussing a possible plan for the young person to receive additional services. The young person is apprehensive the entire meeting and doesn't give much reassurance that they will follow through with the plan. Upon leaving, the care coordinator pulls the YPA aside and says, "Just know, I work with young people all the time. Eventually, they will see what needs to happen." So who's really leading on that? Is it the youth peer advocate, the YPA, the youth, I mean, the care coordinator, all the people that are involved in this scenario? Who is leading? Yeah, Michelle says care coordinator. Milagros says the care coordinator. Care coordinator. Yeah. Okay. All right. I feel like we have a consensus that it's the care coordinator. In this scenario, the care coordinator is leading. The young person's voice is being ignored. Sorry. This impacts the young person because they are not getting their needs met, and it impacts the team by imposing a plan that will not be followed through with. The situation could be corrected by allowing the young person to share what they feel could work best to support their needs. All right, so the next scenario, a youth peer advocate has been working with a young person for a few weeks now, and they are excited with the help they are getting. The supervisor comes to the youth peer advocate and shares that the young person and the family have been bragging about everything the YPA has been doing for them. For example, calling places for the young person to ask questions, putting all their appointments in the calendar, etc. When the supervisor expresses concern, the youth peer advocate feels hurt and responds, "I'm just being helpful." So who's leading in this activity or in this scenario? Youth peer advocate, youth peer advocate. Once again, we seem to have a general consensus that it's the youth peer advocate, and you would be right. The youth peer advocate is leading in this scenario. The young person is not being supported to make informed choices, but rather the youth peer advocate is doing it for them. This impacts the young person because they are not being supported in learning things that can contribute to their independence. The situation could be corrected if the youth peer advocate worked with the young person and coach them in skills needed for them to follow through with these activities independently. Yeah, so it's important we're not just doing everything for the youth, right? There's in the 4-day training, there's a scenario. You'll get a preview if you haven't taken it yet, and if you've taken it, you probably remember the scenario of cleaning the youth's room, right? Is that within our scope to clean the youth's room for them? And most of the time, the answer ends up being no. There's always these little like sort of like, well, if, kind of exceptions of like just once to get them started, and that's yeah, like we're just kind of getting the ball rolling, we're planning, and then from now on you do it, kind of thing. So keeping that in mind, we're not just doing everything for them. All right. The next scenario. A youth peer advocate is preparing a youth workshop on knowing your rights in special education. The youth peer advocate has 7 young people confirmed to attend the workshop. The youth peer advocate enlists the help of coworkers and the supervisor to put the workshop together. That morning, calls were made by the office to remind the young people. The YPA arrives early to the session and has everything all set for the young people. The YPA wants to be sure that everything is perfect before the young people get there. Staff were assigned to lead different parts of the agenda. Who is leading who in that activity? Who's leading? YPA, 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 YPA. Yeah. Okay. So the consensus that y'all have is YPA. So the YPA and the agency, as it says, are leading in this scenario. Young people have no input or enthusiasm to attend the event, right? If you notice, they're doing everything. They're doing reminder calls, they're putting together everything, the youth advocates. This event may also not meet the needs of the young people. This situation could be corrected by working with young people to get their input into the whole process, such as the topic subject, questions they have about the topic, providing input, and supporting the event itself through setup and facilitation. Yeah. All right. So we have we have a brief Q&A. Just any questions about the letters that we went over the document quickly before we proceed with the next part, and then there will be like more like a bigger Q&A. So does anybody have any questions, pressing questions? And if you'd like to use like the chat as a parking lot for your questions, like you have a question, you just don't want it answered now, or have to think about it a little bit, or you come up with something while we're in the next section, we'll get to that as well. So I will hand the next part over to Mimi, procedures and policy, violation policy.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, before we go there, while you were talking about the responsibilities of a YPA in terms of making sure that your credential is up to date, I wanted to just give you guys this link, which goes to our YPA credential verification tool, which means that you guys can all check in on the status of your credential. So you can use that to put your name in, and it will populate what your YPA credential number is and when it expires and things like that too. So that is something that we do to try to help you, because it is your responsibility as a YPA to make sure that your credential stays up to date. All right. Now I am ready to move on to the procedures and violation policy section. So we're going to provide an overview as to what the report process looks like and discuss how to prevent ethics violations. So what happens? Go ahead, Jane. Thank you. What happens when a code of ethic violation happens? So first there is an investigation. So complaints can be submitted to Families Together. This will happen by either a family, a youth, or a supervisor. These reports are reviewed by the Training and Workforce Development Department. So that would be Jay, myself, our supervisor, and a few others that are in this department. Next, the Youth Peer Advocate Credential Advisory Committee, also known as our YPACAC, will formally investigate the complaint and will vote on an appropriate course of action. The YPACAC is comprised of youth, young adults, youth peer advocates, and adult allies from across the state, and they are experts in the YPA role. If you are interested in joining our YPACAC, please feel free to put your interest in the chat, and we can make sure that we get you more information as to how to join our Youth Peer Advocate Credential Advisory Committee. From there, if legal violations are suspected, the appropriate authorities are notified. Next slide. So let's talk about what your rights are as an accused YPA. So Families Together in New York State will reach out to the YPA to let them know that we have received this complaint and here's what we think needs to happen. That comes from the conversation with the YPA-CAC, and the YPA will then be given an opportunity to submit a written response and or an appeal if they don't agree with the decision. For this, extensions for response may be granted upon request. We understand that sometimes the situation can be very upsetting and YPAs may need more time to state their case, as well as gather the full details of the situation. After that, the YPA will be given an opportunity to appeal the YPA-CAC's decision if they disagree. All right, so what are the possible consequences? So second. Possible consequences can lead to the revocation of the YPA credential, which this means is that you would just no longer be identified as a YPA, and you would not be listed on our website for that. You could no longer identify yourself as a youth peer advocate, and there might be some other ramifications as to you providing other peer services, and things like that. You can also be required to take some continuing education coursework before you can continue your work as a YPA and return to providing services. So they might say, we would like you to complete 10 additional hours of continuing education. We might even tell you what specific places we'd like you to have them in. We might send you some trainings. They might even be CTAC trainings, honestly, so that you can make sure that you're getting that continued education and working on those skills prior to returning to providing services. Or your credential could be suspended temporarily, and then we would also let you know what that length of time looked like and if there are any steps that you need to take when you're coming back. So I do want to note, we are very thankful here. YPA Code of Ethics violations happen very, 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 very rarely. And we try to make sure that we provide you guys with a wealth of training and resources to prevent this from happening. But these are the potential consequences for violating the Code of Ethics. Next slide. So with that, does anyone have any questions? If not, I will toss it back to Jay to get us wrapped up.
Great. Thanks everybody for coming. And if you have any other questions, if you want to know more about the events that are coming up, I will put some information in the chat about that as people are filing out. Thank you, everybody.